Hello, literature lovers. Welcome to your virtual video for September 21st, 2021. Sorry we have to do it this way. I miss you guys. You really are a great class, but hopefully I see you again next week. And in the meantime, I'll let you enjoy just a couple of virtual videos this week. So remember the city of Troy, right? The Trojan War. Maybe you've heard of the wooden horse and of Helen. You know, she was the most beautiful woman in the world, supposedly. But there's more to the myth than we have heard so far. And so let's finish the run through of this greatest tale ever told, one of them anyway. So we return to our story as 10 years of siege have passed outside the gates of Troy. In the 10th year of the siege on Troy, dramatic events begin to unfold. King Agamemnon, if you remember, he's the leader of the Greek forces. He seizes Achilles prisoner, a young woman named Briseis. He takes her for himself. Furious, Achilles withdraws from battle together with his troops. Now, Achilles' mother is a sea goddess. Her name is Thetis, and she asks Zeus to favor the Trojans for a while as a favor to her. So Agamemnon will regret dishonoring her son. So in the fighting that follows, the Trojans gain ground and are able to set up camp on the plain outside the city. That puts them alarmingly close to the Greek ships. So Patroclus, who is Achilles' closest and dearest friend, is desperate to drive them back, and so he disguises himself in Achilles' armor. And he leads the Greeks into battle, hoping to raise Greek spirits and also, of course, to intimidate the Trojans. And at first the plan works, but Patroclus is killed in battle by the Trojan prince Hector. Achilles is in a state, he is grief-stricken, and he desperately now wants vengeance against Hector. So he sets aside his quarrel with Agamemnon for the moment, and he returns to battle with Hector and revenge on his mind. He wears new armor given to him by his mother, and victory once more favors the Greeks. And Achilles decides it's time to set out and kill Hector. So Achilles and Hector face each other in combat. Achilles lunges forward as Hector falls back, and his chest is wounded and exposed, and Hector is slain. So, but still, Achilles is still filled with rage and grief. It's not enough. So he does not allow Hector's body to be returned to the Trojans for the customary funeral. Instead, as Hector's family watches from the walls of Troy, he dishonors Hector's body by dragging it through the dust behind his chariot. And over the coming days, he repeatedly drags the body through the dirt. Finally, the gods take pity on Hector and his family, and Hermes, the messenger god, helps them, and he helps, I got mixed up. He helps the Trojan king, Priam, to secretly enter the Greek camp and beg Achilles to allow him to pay ransom for his son's body. And so Achilles, his need for vengeance is fulfilled now. It subsides, and he grants Priam's request. And in the book, the Iliad, it's this extraordinary, moving moment which kind of restores humanity to Achilles, who is a hero, right? And a sense of order to the world. And so the funeral of Hector can now take place. So Hector is dead, but the war is not over. It goes on. And Troy has not fallen yet. And more allies come to the city's aid. Some of them from far away. With the help of Achilles, the Greeks defeat the Amazons, who are female warriors, and they defeat the Ethiopians, who have come from Africa. Sadly, Achilles knows already that he is fated to die young. His divine mother had foretold that he would have a short life if he stayed to fight at Troy. And so it is that Paris, the Trojan prince, whose love of Helen originally started the whole war, he will end the life of Achilles. If you remember, Achilles' mother had made him invulnerable. Can't kill him by dipping him, held him by his heel and dipped him as a baby into the river Styx, which would protect him for his life. But Paris hits the weak point with his arrow, of course, his Achilles' heel, and he fells the world's greatest warrior at that point. And soon the Greeks will win this war by an ingenious piece of deception dreamed up by the hero and king of Ithaca. His name is Odysseus. You may have heard of him. He's famous, he's smart, he's famous for his cunning. And so Homer writes how they build this wooden horse and leave it outside the gates of Troy as an offering to the gods, while they pretend that they've given up and they sail their ships out of sight. But secretly, though, they have put men, including Odysseus, inside this wooden horse. So at first, the Trojans are a little suspicious, like, what's going on? What are the Greeks doing? But eventually they come to believe that this horse, which represents the Trojans were great horsemen, and they decide they're going to bring the horse into the city. It must be a gift from the gods, and they're going to celebrate their victory. They're just going to have a wild celebration all night, drinking and carousing all night long. But when night falls, the hidden Greeks creep out, and they open the gates to let the rest of the Greek army into the city of Troy. And in the meantime, the Greek navy has sailed back during the carousing. Nobody noticed, and the city is attacked and it is sacked. The men and boys are brutally slain, including King Priam and Hector's little toddler son. Women are abused and taken captive, and Troy has fallen. But there's still hope for the Trojan survival. Aeneas is the nephew of King Priam, and he escapes the city with his old father, his young son, and some Trojan refugees. Aeneas' story is told by another epic poet by the name of Virgil in a book called the Aeneid. So after the fall of Troy, the surviving Greek heroes and their troops, they don't get to enjoy their victory. The gods are angry with the Greeks because they've committed these terrible sacrilegious acts against the will of the gods, as they brutally and mercifully destroyed the people in the city. And so few of the Greeks reach their homes easily, and few live to enjoy their return. The most difficult journey of all is that of Odysseus. You may have heard his story somewhere. He is forced to travel to the furthest reaches of the Mediterranean Sea. He is tormented by the sea god Poseidon. He is waylaid by storms. He is shipwrecked. A colorful crowd of strange beings and treacherous people, from the one-eyed Cyclops to the sirens with their mesmerizing songs, leading sailors to their death. But Odysseus, being so very clever as he is, finds a way to hear the siren's song without being lured to his death on the dangerous rocks below. But that's another story. So the question is, was Troy a myth? For a long time in the 1800s, people searched for it, couldn't find it, said Homer made this up. This is not a real place. It didn't actually happen 3,000 years ago. Okay, so this is a long time ago, even for the Greeks then. But then a German amateur historian and archaeologist by the name of Heinrich Schliemann in 1871 finds the remains of Troy in northwest Turkey. There is a map that is attached to the email with this video that I want you to look at that map, and you can see where the location of Troy was, where the currently excavated ruins of Troy are. The reason Troy was such a wealthy and famous city is you see it's located to all these major water areas. It's on the Mediterranean and the Aegean. The Aegean is part of the Mediterranean, and then there's a waterway called the Dardanelles that leads northeast from Troy up to the Black Sea, and the Black Sea opens up all of Europe for trade. And so they just had this amazing strategic location, and that's why Troy was such a rich, famous city. But so this guy Schliemann, he actually used Homer's book, the Iliad, believing these are real geographic places, and he uses that to find Troy. And actually, he developed that approach to archaeology, using ancient texts to find ancient sites. So he goes on this tour, Schliemann, on this tour of Asia Minor, and he goes to this small Turkish village called Hisarlik, where he believes in northwestern Turkey might be the site of Troy. And 5 years later, he and his team, and he was a little unorthodox in his archaeological methods. Some places he used dynamite to get down this 20, 30 feet of dirt and stone and stuff to get down to where he finds treasure. He finds golden cups and vases and jewelry, and he proclaims this is the treasure of Troy. And so he had a crew of 80 laborers working with him. After that, they uncovered ancient foundations almost exactly where they thought they would be, at a depth of, like I said, 23 to 33 feet. Here are the foundations of Troy. There are roads. There are the ruins of gates. There's the Temple of Athena. There are altars for sacrifice. There's ruins of the great tower and houses and streets. And they're all as they were described in the Iliad. And so it becomes like, this sounds more like Homer was writing a history of Troy, not making up stories about Troy. But the story of the Trojan horse, one of the most famous of all the Greek myths, people have always said, well, that obviously Homer made that. It's impossible. It's impossible that an ancient people with extremely limited technology could come up with a horse that could hold an army. I mean, it would have to be the size of, like, a 2-3 story building. And just think of the weight of it. Computer models show that if you made a horse that big, first of all, imagine how long it would take. But then they say it would probably weigh over 3 tons. And then now you just have some guys and ropes to pull this 3-ton giant wooden structure. It's like moving a house, like with 4, 10, 20 guys pulling it with ropes. Excuse me. It doesn't seem to work out in terms of what was available and the amount of weight and stuff. But then archaeologists said, wait a second. Since Schliemann got all of this right, maybe we need to rethink what went on with the Trojan horse. And so there is an archaeologist who decided that perhaps we've misinterpreted this for a long time. The whole Greek army didn't need to get into Troy at once. What they needed was a few guys who could get in secretly and open the gates for the rest of the army. So remember, the Trojan War has been going on for 10 years, no end in sight. And Odysseus, if he was a real person, came up with this idea that would win the war for the Greeks. The Trojan people considered horses sacred. They were also very proud of being horse people, great horsemen. They, had beautiful horses. They trained horses. They used horses for trade as part of what made the city rich, along with its many waterways. And so the Greeks said, let's build a hollow wooden horse and put in enough guys that in the dark of night, they can sneak out of the horse and go and open the city gates and let the rest of the Greek army in. And they even used sacred wood from sacred trees called cornel trees there to construct the horse. And so Odysseus and probably a small group of men, if this is a true story, which the ancient Greeks believed it was, hid inside while the rest of the Greek army pretended that they were leaving, just taking down their camp, destroying what was left, sailing their ships out of sight. So the Trojans see this thing outside their gate. They debate whether or not, can we trust the Greeks? Did the Greeks do this? Did the gods do this? But they finally said, the Greeks are gone, right? This must be a gift from the gods. And so they drag the horse inside the walls of the city, and it looks like the war is over. The siege is over after 10 years. Oh, that's another thing. How could the city of Troy have withstood a siege for 10 years? Then there's a reason. They found in the ruins of Troy that they had hot and cold water springs within the walls of the city. So they had plenty of water, and they also had secret tunnels where they could sneak out of the city and they could get food that they needed. They could, hunt animals. They could, harvest things that were outside the city as well. And they also had things growing inside the city, it appears, from the ruins. So they were able to survive this 10-year siege, which most cities would have run out of food and water fairly quickly, but Troy had these resources. And so the siege is over, the war is over, let's celebrate. So they spend the night celebrating. And so the Greeks inside the wooden horse, they wait patiently until the people are drunk, passed out, have gone off to bed, and the Greek fleet returns in the darkness of night, and Odysseus leads his men out of the Trojan horse to kill the guards and open the gates. Now the Greek army has full access to the city. They massacre the Trojans, they keep a few alive as slaves, and they return triumphantly to Greece. And like I said, the ancient Greeks saw this myth as factual, occurring between 1300 and 1200 BC in northwest Turkey. And there's one little addendum to the story that's kind of interesting. Historians and archaeologists and anthropologists aren't sure about it yet, but they strongly suspect that some of the soldiers didn't go back to Greece. Some of them traveled to other areas around the Mediterranean, and supposedly that may have led to the creation of the city of Rome, which, after the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans were the next great society. So that's it for my video today. You will have, I believe, one or two other videos attached to this email. If they're not there, it's because I couldn't find the ones I really liked. So otherwise, you'll get another virtual video on Thursday. So until you see me again then, have a great week, and bye for now.